All right, so I went out and found some convenient data in our staging environment that we can use to kind of demonstrate the process. So we have a pay request that goes through multiple generations where they're reaching the 50% point in the project. And so I think before I start, everybody understands how to set up retainage at the start of the project and do the initial retainage portion. So we're really talking about when we get ready to escrow the retainage once it reaches the 50% point of the project. Is that correct? Okay, hearing no objections, I'm going to assume that that's correct. So this particular project that we're looking at here, and I'm going to start with a pay request where they actually got to 50%. Maybe I am. Here we go.
I think there has been confusion of who goes in and changes that figure, you know, like the CMR will send in their pay request and that one happens to get them past the 50% mark, but it's still showing the retainage. So they get confused because it doesn't get turned off until after it gets to Alicia. So that, and then it doesn't get changed from the 8% to 0% until the next pay application. So I think that has been confusion on everyone's part, at least mine and the CMRs, if that makes sense. Did I say that right, Alicia?
Okay, that makes sense to me, and we can look at that. Please excuse my test record because my test record actually took retainage or stopped taking retainage before they got to 50%, but it was the test data I had available, and you can't really update records in that state. But what happened here is in the prior record, we had 8% retainage, and retainage was being calculated. When this particular record was created, the firm that created it would still see that we were holding 8% retainage, and they would see additional retainage. In fact, it shows right here that on this particular pay request, we withheld an additional $920 of retainage, and that is correct because we would stop taking additional retainage on the pay request that goes over the 50% mark. And so basically at that point, that's the amount of retainage that we'll have for the remainder of the contract. So in this case, what you do is you take the amount of retainage that's showing in the retainage block here and move it down to the contract retainage withheld block. And then you reset the retainage percent to 0, and this will update to 0. So basically you're removing the retainage from the first line here where it's being actively calculated and incremented down to the second line where it's going to remain the same amount for the remainder of the project or the remainder of the contract.
And that piece is the PC does that, correct?
The project coordinator does that, and they should do that on the pay request where the contract percent complete goes over 50%. So, and they should actually do it on that pay request, not the next one. If you wait until the next one, then it will calculate additional retainage that should not be taken out of the contractor's money. So you want to do it on the first time that you see retainage over 50%. And so once you move it down to this line.
So Steve, that's the confusion, I'm sorry. So they are going in and changing that line where it says retainage percentage. When on, say I was at 48% complete and I got to 52% on pay application number 10. And that's when I hit it. So at that point in time, when it gets to Alicia's step, she's going to go in and she's going to take those first two lines out. She's going to move the amount that's on that retainage right there on the first line, move it down to the one that says contract retainage withheld, put it there. And at that same time, that's when she's changing this percentage to a 0 and changing that to a 0. She's not supposed to wait until the next pay application and do that?
That's correct.
Okay, and I don't know that. Okay.
Yeah, and that's actually in the record itself. So in the instructions on the record, it explains that, and it's also in that job aid for that step for the PC.
All right, so on this particular pay request, that was all that was done, and that's fine. Basically, if you follow this retainage down through the pay request, we get to a withheld retainage balance of $1,200. And that withheld retainage balance is going to work down through the pay request. It's going to go here first. So the retainage for the current period, it goes into this accumulation of various withheld amounts. It ends up down here in this withheld labor data element. And then when we come down to the payment requested, it ends up right here under withheld from labor. So we know that we're holding with retainage, and that $1,200 that we're withholding is not going to be in the money that we're paying the contractor. So in this particular case, we would expect the total requested to be $920 less than the value that they were able to add on the schedule of values. So because we saw up here that there were $920 added to retainage in this period. We did not, in this particular pay request a retainage check be written. So we did not request that the treasurer write a check to send to the bank. So we could actually leave that $1,200, and if it was $1,200, you probably would. We can actually leave that $1,200 of retainage as it sits here to the end of the project. And then when they got ready to release retainage, it had never been escrowed. When we were ready to release it, we would come over here to the withheld retainage released element, and we would put that $1,200 in here. And then our retainage balance would go to 0, and that $1,200 would get paid from the district, or well, in your case, from the district to the contractor, and that would be basically the release of retainage. So that would be the case when I never send my retainage to the bank, never put it in escrow. State law says that we're supposed to send it to the bank.
But I thought that was changed.
Yeah,
I thought that was changed.
Yeah, we should always send our money to escrow. So don't do that.
What we should do, and what actually gets done on projects, I know. I'm only explaining how the pay application works. Rhonda. So, you guys asked me, well, what if we need to do it later? Well, as long as no check has been sent and no voucher has been issued, we're going to hold the $1,200 here. It's going to get taken off of each pay request from this line on the payments requested calculation. And when you go down and look at the sum of the project funds paid, it hasn't been paid yet. It's not in there. So when you come down and look at contract balance, again, it hasn't been paid out. So this sum of labor payments escrowed is 0. We haven't actually made an escrow payment at this point on this project.
Steve.
So what we're trying to do here is make the balance to finish on the pay request the same as the balance to finish on purchase order.
Hold that thought 1 second. Hold that thought 1 second. I want to ask Sarah Zimmerman regarding vouchering. Does the district voucher the release of retainage? They vouchered the pay application when they made payment. And now when they release retainage on that same payment, they voucher the retainage as well later?
So if they sent it to escrow, no. But if they didn't, then yes.
Good distinction, yeah. And then there's the escrow. If they send it to escrow, nothing gets vouchered. Could you explain to us, I guess, the vouchering process?
That's incorrect.
That's incorrect. When they voucher to the escrow to the bank, you will see it as a voucher to Fifth Third Bank $1,200.
Let's hold on first. Okay, so let's pretend that we're always going to escrow. So at this point, when a PC sees that we've hit 50%, they're going to send an email or a letter to the treasurer, also noted on the record, right, that it's time to escrow funds. I'm asking PCs, right? That's correct.
That's correct. We attached the escrow letter to this, the pay request, so they could see it. We put it in the comments. And if
Okay.
there's still a note section within the pay request, and I haven't seen that, I don't know, there's a note section in the pay request. We put it everywhere so that they can't be missed. There's
Okay.
your note section. We put it in there as well.
That at this point, when we're approving it as a PC, it's likely that the treasurer hasn't made that move to escrow yet. And so right now it would stay as is, Steve, that you have it. And then
You all are so type A today. We will go through that whole process if you'll give me a chance.
Okay.
All right. So on this particular set of sample records that I found, on the next pay request, which was, yeah, it's this, these pay requests aren't necessarily labeled coherently. So, I'm so slow today. I think it must have something to do with being on the conference call as well, because this was running great like 10 minutes ago. So we'll come down in this particular pay request, and the same thing happened. We just carried the $1,200 across, and it continues to carry down. On the pay request after that, they actually come in and ask for that retainage check, and I'll show you how they do that. And it's exactly what we were just talking about. They're gonna send a letter to the treasurer. Oh, come on. There we go. And they need to do a couple of things in OAKS CI. And on this particular pay request, under retainage, we're going to continue to hold the $1,200 back, but we're going to ask the treasurer to write a check that will go to the bank. And so what we do is we have a kind of a flag field here where we say, hey, retainage check was requested on July 1st, 2029. So when you put a date in there, that date's also going to show up on the next pay request. So it's going to get carried forward. So if you come in,
sorry, and would this be the request that the PCs would then attach that letter to in the comment section and note it down below?
Yes, this would be the request where the PC is going to create the letter and would make a note down below. So we put the retainage check requested on field here so that the next time this pay request comes through, you're reminded that, oh, I've already requested a check on this, because the project coordinators who are doing the pay request aren't necessarily in the loop, particularly in K-12, of what happened to that retainage request. Did the check actually get cut? Did it go to the bank? Has the account been established yet? And so through one or two means, you can either go look in the escrow BP here, if that's being completed correctly, or you can call the treasurer and find out, did that check actually get written? So we have flagged on this pay request that we've requested a check, and we continue to withhold the $1,200 as we have done previously. So you don't take this out yet. You don't make any other changes to the form other than to flag that I asked for a check. And when we come down to the payment requested section, we're continuing to hold $1,200 from the payments for retainage. So we're continuing to get the right amount requested at this point. On the next pay request, and I have the next pay request up here. So this pay request is currently circulating, and it's at the project coordinator step. we're going to walk through the changes that we're going to make on it. So this has come to the project coordinator for verification and validation, and I've already accepted it. And if we come down to the retainage field, so first of all, notice our flag is still here. So we know that we have requested it. And let's assume that we know that the retainage check has been sent to the bank. So it's been set up at the bank at this point. What we're going to do is, first of all, we did not release retainage. So your first thought is, I'm going to put $1,200 in for retainage released. I'm actually not going to do that. I'm actually going to put 0 in for contract retainage withheld. I'm just going to take the money out of here. And so now I'm not withholding any retainage, and I'm going to come down to this block, which is called escrow paid to blank. And under contract retainage escrowed, I'm going to put my $1,200. And so it's showing a escrow retainage balance at the bank now of $1,200. When I come down and look at my payment requested, now notice I no longer have that $1,200 here under withheld from labor. In this particular pay request, that has gone away. But what I do have is I have an escrowed payment for labor, and it's $1,200. So I've moved withholding that $1,200 from this line to this line, and it's still being withheld. It's now been paid to the bank. So we're holding it at the bank instead of holding it on the treasurer's purchase order. And when I come down and look at my contract balance, that $1,200 will show up here. So the sum of labor escrowed is now $1,200, and it gets included in the money that's been spent out of my original schedule values and off my original purchase order. So my new balance to finish will reflect that a voucher has been issued to the bank for escrow.
Hey, Steve, this is Tim Swords real quick. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought when you opened this pay request, you said this is the pay request where they're requesting retainage?
No, this is the pay request after they requested retainage. Remember, on the previous pay request, we put the date in that indicated that we were requesting retainage.
This is the pay request after they reached the 50% retainage, not that they requested it.
Said, this is the pay request after they have requested release of retainage, correct, Steve?
That's the one after they have requested it, right?
Afterwards. So basically what we're saying is I guess on ones I'm used to, that same pay request where they request release retainage kind of was the end all be all. Now you're saying it's like 2 pay requests for them to actually get retainage. Is that correct?
So on the pay request where you go past 50%, you would ask the treasurer to issue a check and set it up in escrow. Yes. On the next pay request, assuming that has been done, you would do this process.
Sorry, our terminology is getting off. I was thinking you're talking about the CMR requesting retainage. You're talking about getting the retainage from OAKS effectively or off the books into the bank, basically.
Correct.
I got you. Sorry.
Yeah, can we define these, please? Because I think you're using different terms than what we're used to. When the treasurer moves the money into escrow, that's escrowing the money.
It's called transferring to escrow.
Yeah, when the contractor is asking for retainage, that's called a release of retainage. Because I'm getting confused.
And nothing that I'm talking about right now has anything to do with release of retainage. This only has to do with what you do when you get to 50% and you're ready to transfer the retainage to an escrow account at the bank.
Okay, Steve, that's where everybody was confused because you kept saying releasing retainage, and it's not. It's transferring of retainage to.
Okay, so are there any questions about, it's a 2-step process. Any questions about those 2 steps? Because it's that simple on the application for payment.
Okay, so the PCs are the ones that fill out the escrow box, though. They get notification or find out from the treasurer when things are escrowed, and then they actually fill in that escrow box versus a treasurer doing some action to escrow.
The project coordinator completes the escrow paid to bank block on the application for payment, yes.
Steve, this is Christine. Oh, this is Christine. Could you scroll for a moment towards the top again? The box that had the, there, right there. So when does the withheld retainage release? Is that to come? Am I jumping ahead? We don't put anything in there now until that's actually the true release of the.
That's exactly what I said. I said, do not put $1,200 of retainage released because you have not released retainage.
Okay. That is for the true release, as in release. Okay, thank you.
So, and again, these forms are set up to support both cases. If you put the retainage in escrow, these forms will support that process. If it's never escrowed, they support that process also. And I know what the state law says, and the state law hasn't changed in the 12 years that OCI has been available, but this is the way we built the forms anyway. So,
hey, Steve, while you're still in that box, I noticed at the bottom for the additional retainage, now it shows it as a negative, so that's just implying you've taken it out of there. It's not implying anything. It's just saying you've taken it out of that particular queue, not out of the project.
that is correct. So it's come out of this queue and it's now in our escrow queue. And it really reflects this change when you get down to, want the payment requested. It really reflects that we're no longer withholding it at the district. We're now holding it at the bank. So that $1,200 moved from this line to this line, and this particular data element here is really there to let you see how much escrow is held, or how much retainage was held. I'm sorry, how much retainage was held out of this particular pay request. So,
hey, Steve, is there interest or fees attributed to the escrow accounts? And if there are we supposed to be accounting for those? Or is that something we're going to cover?
and interest and fees are outside of the scope of OAKS-CI. Sarah Zimmerman might be able to answer your question in terms of interest is accrued, and I know that it belongs to the contractor at the end of the project.
Correct.
But that's as much as I know.
Well, it's when that happens, if there's interest or if there's fees, that's going to be a different number than we have recorded in OAKS for what to release.
Yes, that's true.
But if it's done properly, and it usually is not, if it's done properly and the district goes ahead and puts the money in the escrow account like they're supposed to, at that point in time, they voucher it and it becomes an expense to the project. Then when the CMR requests the retainage, not only are they getting the $1,200, they're going to get the interest earned on that escrow, but it should never show up on our books anywhere because, one, it's never in the district's books, that interest, if they're doing it properly, because that is coming directly from the bank. And when that money, the $1,200, is released from the bank, it doesn't get recorded again as a voucher if it's done properly. So it doesn't screw up any of our OAKS and their FinDebt, because it's never in the FinDebt and it's never in OAKS if it's done properly.
Correct.
The problem is a lot of times districts don't escrow it. They're calculating interest on it. Then when they go to release retainage because they didn't escrow it, they're writing a check to the CMR for $1,200 plus the $600 for the interest earned. that's when your books get screwed up, because they're getting paid $600 more than what their contract was, because the district is putting that interest in an account and then paying them and then showing it on their books. That's where it gets messed up if they are not doing it in escrow, from what I've experienced.
Or it get vouchered twice,
And
which shouldn't be.
Stacy is correct on the interest piece. If we want to let Steve finish walking us through the OAKS piece, I'm going to share, I've been drafting a treasurer's manual that hopefully we're going to have available on our website soon for the treasurers. And there's a section on retainage. So I'll share that page and walk you through what the treasurers should be doing on their side.
All right, so the application for payment, I've shown you everything you need to know about managing retainage on the application for payment. It's literally you move the retainage from this line to this line when you get to 50%, and that allows you to stop taking it. You put a flag in when you ask for a check, and when you verify that the check has been deposited in the bank, then you move the retainage from this line down to the escrow paid to bank line. And that's all you have to do on the application for payment. There's two
Steve,
more.
I want to confirm one thing. One more thing. So this is where part of my confusion is this all done on the pay application at the time we meet or exceed the 50%, and at that same time is when the PC goes in and changes that 8% to 0, or are they doing that on the next pay application? That's where my confusion is.
So it's a two-step process. You do the first step when you reach 50%, and you do the second step when you confirm that escrow has been deposited, and that will be on a later pay request.
Okay, so what's going to happen on the later pay
later?
What's happening on the later, this next pay application is just confirming that they put it into escrow. What's happening on the current pay application when they meet 52% is when they are moving from the one line item 1,200 down to the escrow where they're requesting it, and they're changing the 8% at that time. They're not waiting until the next pay application to change that 8%. Correct? Okay, because that's where some of the confusion is and things are happening on the next one.
All right, so I want to actually move back a pay request here because this is with the coordinator. And yes, I'm going to leave. I'm going to move back to this pay request, which is has gone to the treasurer. And let's let it open. So you've asked questions about, do you voucher retainage? And in K-12, you definitely want to voucher retainage because you've paid it out, and we're providing our funds as you have expenses on the project. So you need to record that you did a voucher to the bank for escrow. And the way the treasurer would do that, and they can do it straight from the application from payment when they actually get it for doing the payment, they have a vouchers tab, and they're going to select the vouchers tab. And in this case, we've already made the payment for the pay request itself, and that's the voucher that you see right here. So this particular pay request was for $2,500, and that voucher has already been done by the treasurer. If they want to voucher retainage from the pay request, they'll create another voucher here. And they can come in, and typically we put status in as paid payment purpose. In this case, it's not going to be application for payment, it's going to be retainage. And the financial system of record is going to be the district. The voucher automatically picks the pay request and puts it in here. So they're going to have to click this X here to say, I don't want to pay the pay request again. I already did that, but I want to come down here to contract retainage, and I'm going to pick the pay request that I'm paying the retainage off of. So this is typically going to be the last pay request in the list here when they do it. and it's going to bring in the amount of the contract retainage onto the voucher. So it didn't bring in the $2,500 of the pay request, which it would have done up here. It brings in the actual contract retainage amount. So we want them to write a $1,200 check to the bank here. So that's what comes in here. And then they're going to go off to their financial system of record and do that, and they'll come over here and put whatever their payment ID is. And I'm used to payment IDs being 8 characters, so we'll just make this 1, 2, 3, 4, and the amount that they're paying, which would be $1,200. They would come back and again do the distribution. So they're going to basically fill out the rest of the voucher here.
Can you go back up to the top of that, of when you selected paid and all that? I just want to see something that I'm just confused because I don't think, okay, because in the old version, when we would select retainage, it would automatically populate the retainage box. But you're saying that in this case, they have to go down and select the retainage, remove that one from the contract and go down to the retainage and select it. Is that what you're saying now?
I'm saying, and they have always had to come down and select which application for payment they want the retainage to come off of. So
Okay.
they've always had to make this selection. What used to happen, and this is a subtle change that we've made recently, is this used to limit you, if you put retainage in here, it would limit you to only select retainage.
That's what I was thinking right there. That's what the change was. I knew it, something changed. So yeah, okay.
The problem we ran into is when you're doing this from a query tab like we are here, if you select retainage and then you come down here and see the application for payment, the $2,500, it's already locked this block. It won't let you take it out, and it doesn't clear it. So it was like, well, we need to not lock everything up. We need to let them say it's retainage, and then come down here and say, yep, I don't want to do another payment to the vendor. I want to do the contract retainage, which is right here underneath of it. So that's why we actually made that little change, and you're very observant to pick that up. So that is all they have to do to record the voucher, is just come in here and make that those entries, and then obviously put the funds on it. And since almost all of the school facilities are now, these are obviously made up funds because we're in a made up environment. But since all of them are doing their own vouchers now anyway, I don't think this will be a problem for anybody. They're going to know what to do when they get in here. So now I have everything I need to come up here and submit and save that particular voucher for contract retainage, and it's going to get pulled into drawdown just like any other voucher that we do. Interestingly enough, Rita, it's not going to show up here, is it?
No.
That's a surprise to me, but I understand why it's not showing up there. And I don't know if we can correct that or not. We'll have to think about how to make that work. Then we may not be able to. I was actually expecting it to show up and it didn't. It will show up if you go look at your vouchers. So right here, it's going to be the most recent voucher created. And there's your voucher for retainage.
Steve, did it give you a spot where to put the name of the bank where that was written to, like the vendor name?
It did not. However, well, actually it did, and I didn't fill it in, which is why vendor name's blank here. The third record that may be interesting here is the escrow account, and we're just going to go in and create one. I don't actually see one in here already for retainage. One of the questions that you had asked kind of explicitly was, well, who should fill in the escrow account information? And this would be something that the treasurer should fill in because they're the only one who's going to deal with the bank and the actual escrow account itself. So for anybody else to try to do this, they just would not have the information available. And the whole design of this business process was really so that we could track deposits and withdrawals from a particular escrow account. So we know what money was escrowed and so on and so forth. You can use these for retainage. You can also use them for liens. So if you have a lien, you set up an escrow for that particular lien, then you can go in here and actually track the escrow in an escrow account as well. And the key things in here are the contract information, and this is going to be crazy because we have a gazillion contracts. I happen to know the one I'm using is number 142, so we'll pick that, and you can see it brings in the information. It would bring in the tax ID if this weren't a staging environment and it wasn't blank. It's going to ask you who the escrow agent is, and again, you can go in and pick the bank, which for us, this is Huntington, and we have Huntington set up in our OAKS environment. If you have an individual district and they have a different escrow relationship, then we would have to get this financial institution added to our table of financial institutions. And so that would be a request to the support desk just to add a record for a particular bank because the treasurers are not going to have access to the financial institution table. So I can pick Huntington here, or my favorite is the Bank of Uncertain Returns. And that would typically include the account number as well. And then in this case, it's going to bring in the retainage information from the pay request that we just looked at. So we pulled retainage from this pay request number 30 here, and it's going to bring it in as contract retainage was $1,200. And if it were a lien, you would select the lien here, and it would also bring in the lien amount. And on the second tab, and it's going to want me to fill all this in before it lets me go there. So pending is before the escrow is established. Open means that we have the escrow account with the bank, and closed means that we've distributed the funds. This is retainage. This is retainage escrow. You can include the warrant number and amount. They're optional here. And then we'll go over to transactions, and we're literally just going to put in that this was a deposit for $1,200. So you the fields down here at the bottom are also optional. Julie, when she was doing this for agencies, liked to keep track of when she requested the escrow, when the money was sent to the bank, and when it was actually deposited by the bank, so the transaction date on the statement. And she would keep those updated. Those are not required fields. But what this does basically is show that you have $1,200 in this account. So we can submit this and it will save. And so it's actually down here at the bottom. If I open it back up, if we did a release of escrow, you would open it back up and you would update the record by putting a new transaction on the lower form. So at this point, maybe we do a partial release. For a partial release, all you would do is go to the transactions and indicate that there was a release done. So you would add another record. I'll have to hit edit to get it to let me do that. So this is not a required BP. If your treasurers balk at putting the information in here and they think they have a handle on their escrow accounts, they probably do. We use this for agency because we're putting all of the agency escrow accounts in a single account in Huntington. And so this helps Julie when she gets ready to reconcile the bank statement, understand how much escrow she has and who it should be assigned to. And it may be useful for some of your districts as well. I mean, it was something I would show them, but it's not necessary. If they don't fill this out, it's not going to interact anyplace else in OAKS, so it's not going to be a problem. Questions about the escrow account, BP?
No question, but I'd like to make a comment. As PCs, we sometimes forget to take the 8% off when we do all this other tedious work. Like we look at everything. We do move the money, or we do know how to put a type into the letter, and we just simply forget to take that 8 and put it over to where it belongs. And when the next pay request comes, we will know that it's, you know, we go back and look, wait, did I escrow that? And we go back and look, and then what we've done, and I'm guilty of that, I have looked back to the previous pay request and I put the retainage back to what that last pay request was. So I'm guilty of that. So PMs, I'm sorry. Let me apologize now. I'm sorry. But anyway, there's times that we forget that because we got so much to look for. We look at all the every line item to make sure that they're billing in the right column, you know, labor and material. And we look at the certified payroll. We look for insurance to make sure. I mean, there's a lot that we do with a pay request. We just don't, you know, we make sure that that the backup, if they have backup, because some districts want backup, matches, you know, the current earn, the total requested, and whatever they're billing this period. There's 3 areas we got to look at. So we're looking at the entire pay app. So sometimes we forget. Well, I forget, but I do escrow the amount, and I still forget to move that 8% out. So I don't do it on purpose. It's an accident, but not on purpose.
Lupe, the reason I was bringing that up was because I was wanting it straight for me, because then my CMs are calling me because they're confused as to why it was changed. And then so I have to try and remember when that 8% gets changed, and it does get changed on the one that they reach the percentage after you guys have moved all that, and unless you forget to do it. That's why I was asking that of when it was supposed to be done, so that when my CMRs call me and ask me and they're all confused, I can say, okay, yeah, she meant to change it back last time, she'll get it this time and she'll fix it. So that helps us.
Yeah, that usually, I have CMRs call me, they're like, oh, you forgot to. I say, oh, just put a note. And I usually read the comments, and that reminds me to go move that money back, that it should have been from the previous. So majority of our CMRs are pretty good about that.
Hey, Steve, this is Tim Swords. I don't have a question on the escrow business process, but are you able to open up a window for the pay request again? It doesn't matter whether it's the last one for retainage or the one right after. And then go to the retainage block. Just 2 things. And first one of which is kudos to you, because in the old OAKS version, I used to get frustrated that I'd have to open up the previous pay request just to tell how much retainage was taken out in the current. So I greatly appreciate the additional retainage this period box. Love it. It's great. But the only question I have is that something you could maybe move up so it's in the same row as the retainage percent, retainage amount? Because then it would kind of reflect, here's everything that's applying to this current pay request, and then everything below it is like the running total and all the information. But because like having to look down to the bottom for this period, it kind of seems out of order. It seems
so
like
you would have us move it from here, and I hope you can see my cursor, to here.
Yeah, because then it kind of, that's everything we're looking at for the current pay request in terms of information. And then everything below, like I say, is the more of the running total and lifetime stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable thing that we could look at doing.
And I would only say, if anybody else agrees, it just seems like it would make more sense up there. If no one else would want it moved, then I would not move it just for me, but it seems kind of logical to be up there in that quick look area for the current pay request.
And is that just the labor retainage, if there was stored material retainage, it's not going to be in that box that you guys were just talking about, right?
Stored
Or is it?
materials are a whole different animal. And
Okay,
yes,
I just want to
stored
make sure that
materials
that's
are
not included in that.
associated with this box at all. So if you are looking for stored materials on the pay request, you go up here to the stored materials summary block. That's where you'll find stored materials, and that's a topic for a different day. So don't ask me any questions about it. I'll just tell you that's where you go to look for your stored materials information. All right, if there are no further questions, I think Sarah had some additional presentation that she wanted to do, so I will back out of here and release control.